Hey there, and welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because we're going to be diving into a feeling I know we've all experienced at one point or another. That sudden, heavy, total paralysis of being completely overwhelmed by daily stress. You know the exact feeling, right? When the world just feels a bit too loud, your to-do list feels miles long, and your brain just sort of stops. Let's think about your own week for a second. Have you ever had a day where just answering a single, simple email suddenly feels like you're being asked to climb Mount Everest? Where a little calendar notification pops up and it just feels physically heavy. You're a super capable person. You've done this exact task 100 times before, but right now your brain is just refusing to begin. If that resonates with you, I really want to validate that experience right now. You aren't lazy and you aren't losing your edge.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is a clear roadmap of exactly how we're going to unpack this feeling together today. First, we'll look at the anatomy of overwhelm. Then, your window of tolerance. Third, the science of flooding. Next, highly sensitive people. And finally, shrinking the hill.
All right, Section 1. The anatomy of overwhelm. It's perception, not motivation. You know, when our minds are racing, it's so easy to just blame our own lack of discipline, right? But overwhelm is actually often a perception problem. To really understand this, let's look at this fascinating study in social psychology. Researchers took people to the bottom of a hill and asked them to estimate how steep it was. Some folks stood completely alone. Others stood right beside a supportive friend. Now, obviously, the hill didn't magically flatten out. But the people standing next to a trusted companion consistently perceived the hill as literally less steep. Your brain actually calculates difficulty relationally, not objectively. When we feel supported, challenges literally look more manageable to our brains. Because the thing is, overwhelm rarely arrives all at once. It sneaks up on you. It accumulates. You answer emails late, maybe you skip a break, you absorb some stress from a friend, and eventually, your brain stops seeing individual tasks and starts seeing an accumulation of threats. It's exactly like that physical sensation of running on an empty gas tank with the nearest station miles and miles away. Your nervous system essentially starts estimating that even a tiny 5-minute task is going to cost way too much energy. So remember, it's not a broken work ethic, it's an exhausted perception.
Moving right along to Section 2, your window of tolerance, the emotional sweet spot.
So there's this framework developed by clinical professor of psychiatry Dr. Dan Siegel, and it completely changes how we understand stress. Imagine your emotional capacity works like a literal window. We call this your window of tolerance. It's your optimal emotional regulation zone. Inside this window, you can handle stress, sadness, or frustration, but you don't lose your footing. You can still function. Inside this sweet spot, the rational part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, is communicating effectively with the alarm system of your brain, the amygdala. You can pause, you can think clearly, and you can respond thoughtfully. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is what happens when we slip outside that window. We essentially go one of two ways: up into hyperarousal or down into hypoarousal. Hyperarousal is your sympathetic nervous system just taking over completely. It's classic fight or flight. Your heart races, your breathing gets super shallow, and you feel irritable and panicked. But if that stress feels inescapable, your body might plunge into hypoarousal. This is driven by the dorsal vagal nerve, and it's your body's ultimate shutdown or freeze response. You feel numb, disconnected, fatigued, just emotionally flat. You are physically there, but mentally you're completely checked out. Dr. Siegel actually uses a brilliant metaphor for this called the hand model of the brain. I want you to literally do this with me right now if you can. Tuck your thumb under your fingers, okay? Your thumb, that's the emotional alarm system, the amygdala. Your fingers wrapped over it, that's the rational prefrontal cortex, keeping things nice and calm. But when you get pushed outside your window of tolerance by intense stress, those fingers pop straight up. You literally flip your lid. The amygdala totally hijacks the system, and your rational brain goes entirely offline. Which brings us to Section 3, the science of flooding, when the system overloads.
Drawing on some truly groundbreaking relationship research by Dr. John Gottman, we know that when you flip your lid, your body experiences something called flooding. Flooding is a state of diffuse physiological arousal. Basically, it's the immediate biological consequence of extreme stress or conflict. Your body shifts entirely into fight or flight mode, and when that happens, your higher cognitive functions, things like empathy, active listening, and creative problem solving, are radically diminished.
And science actually gives us a very specific number for exactly when this happens: 100. If your heart rate jumps above 100 beats per minute, or about 85 if you're an athlete, That is the exact threshold where physiological flooding totally takes over. At that heart rate, you are absolutely no longer having a rational conversation. As far as your body is concerned, it thinks it's fighting off a bear. And this brilliantly illustrates a really harsh truth from Dr. Gottman's research. Flooding leads people to reject incoming information. Because of this biological hijack, when your heart rate hits that panic threshold of 100 beats per minute, it is biologically impossible to process new information or argue logically. You literally cannot hear what the other person is trying to tell you, no matter how hard you try.
Moving to Section 4, Highly Sensitive People, the Spectrum of Sensitivity.
Now, you might be wondering why some people seem to hit that 100 beat per minute threshold way faster than others. Well, psychologists Elaine and Arthur Aaron identified a trait called sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS. And let me be clear, this isn't a flaw. It's a temperamental trait where the central nervous system is just highly sensitive to external stimuli. The brain is processing physical, social, and emotional information much, much deeper. For introverts or highly sensitive individuals, ordinary environments like a crowded room or a noisy office require a massive investment of energy to navigate, and that can drain their reserves and narrow their window of tolerance much faster.
If you feel like you really resonate with this, I want to normalize it for you right now. Research estimates that up to 20% of the population, that's literally 1 in 5 people, are wired with this heightened sensitivity. You are completely normal. It just means you have a lower perceptual threshold and you naturally process things a bit more deeply than others.
It's also really important to impartially look at the biology here. Sensitivity is actually an evolutionary trait that researchers have found in over 100 non-human species. It's a biologically anchored survival strategy. Sure, it has evolutionary costs, like getting overwhelmed easily, but it comes with immense benefits, like deeper empathy, heightened awareness, and better memory for environmental details. It is absolutely not a medical disorder that needs to be cured.
Finally, Section 5, Shrinking the Hill, Actionable Tools for Recovery. Okay, let's slow down for a second. Now that we really understand the anatomy and biology of overwhelm, let's look at some empowering, actionable recovery tools. The very first step is just recognizing when your window of tolerance is starting to narrow, catching it before you hit total shutdown. You want to look out for these early warning signs of social burnout: feeling detached from others, an inability to focus, sudden low energy, uncharacteristic irritability, or just feeling like you're on the verge of an emotional meltdown. When you see these signs, your internal dashboard is blinking red. It's time to intervene. Let's move to and see how this builds. When you feel those red lights flashing and hyperarousal taking over, you need an immediate intervention. Try the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding method. It's super practical. Name 5 things you can see around you, 4 things you can physically touch, 3 things you hear, 2 you smell, and 1 you can taste. Doing this actually forces your brain to disengage from all that mental noise, and it pulls your prefrontal cortex right back online by anchoring you directly into present physical reality. But what if you're already in the middle of a conflict and your heart rate is well over 100? Dr. Gottman has some very concrete rules for taking an effective break when you're flooded. First, stop talking immediately. Just pause. Second, name a specific time to check back in so the other person doesn't feel abandoned. Third, separate for at least 30 minutes because it literally takes your body that long to metabolize those stress hormones. And fourth, and honestly most importantly, distract yourself fully. Read a book, take a walk, listen to some music. If you just sit there ruminating and rehearsing your next argument in your head, your heart rate is going to stay high and the break won't work at all. Finally, we really have to rethink how we view asking for help. Modern culture is always telling us to just be tougher or handle it alone. But social baseline theory shows us that the human nervous system evolved literally expecting proximity to supportive others when managing stress. We are hardwired to assume a shared load. Co-regulation isn't a luxury. It's a biological necessity. Reaching out to a trusted friend, a colleague, or a therapist isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually giving your brain the exact biological signal it needs to feel safe again. So the crucial point is this profound thought, which beautifully summarizes everything we've talked about today. Difficulty is rarely measured by the task alone. It is measured by whether we believe we are carrying it alone. So I'll leave you with this. The next time that hill feels a little too steep to climb, ask yourself, are you trying to carry it all by yourself? What is one thing you can put down today, and who is one person you can ask to help you carry the rest? Think about it. Thanks so much for watching this explainer, and we'll see you next time.